what we need to do, I'm going to share my screen, but the first thing I want to talk about is this current allegation that is happening with Nike. Nike, yes, Nike, the athletic wear company and the footwear giant. They have, as you guys know, I mean, I used to wear, Nike growing up, but Nike has built an entire empire on the backs of athletes and champions. But now, you guys, now they're being accused of funding a study that, in plain terms, medically experiments on children. You heard that right. I did not stutter. According to the former NCAA swimmer and women's rights advocate, Riley Gaines, who is beautiful, and I absolutely love how vocal she's been lately. But according to Riley, Nike is funding a study. Y'all listen to this, because I was like, okay, I am hoping that they pull back on this and don't move forward. But according to Riley, Nike is funding a study that injects minor boys with puberty blockers and hormones in order to physically impair them so that they can, wait for it, you guys, compete against girls. Like, these fools have lost their minds. Let me repeat it for you. They are funding a study that is going to experiment on boys and give them hormones on purpose to see if they're able to physically impair these boys so that they can compete against the girls. So let me share my screen. And yes, there we go. I want to play this clip so that you guys can see, or at least listen to Riley explain all of the foolishness. So let's take a listen.
Okay, are we just going to disregard the fact that Nike is apparently funding a study that disfigures young boys to understand if they can be physically impaired enough to compete with girls without significant retained male advantage? And if you're confused what this means, it means Nike is funding a study to give children injectable hormones and puberty blockers. Yes, you heard that right. Nike, the shoe brand, the athletic wear brand, is doing medical experimentation on minors. I haven't bought a Nike product in years. I've known about their use of exploited workers, child labor in third world countries, how they went all in on Colin Kaepernick, how they used a man to model women's products, Dylan Mulvaney, in a woman's sports bra, right? So Nike was already not an option for me. But this experiment is like Nike's own Tuskegee experiment. I guess you can't know the effects of intentionally harming children without intentionally harming children. And from a shoe brand. Like, did Bud Light teach them nothing? So this is from a piece the New York Times did just this past week. You can pause to read it all. Basically, it's saying this scientist who identifies as trans himself, Joanna Harper, is leading a study, an ambitious study, of trans adolescents that measures before they begin hormone therapy and after they have begun to medically transition every 6 months, 4 or 5 years. You see it and highlighted right here. This study is being funded by Nike.
Okay, so I wanted to pause that. Darn, I wish it would have stay right there. That's where I wanted to stay. So there's this study of trans adolescents. So these are teenagers who are still children. Okay, they're not adults, who they're already identifying as trans. This study is designed to measure, there's this 10-step fitness program, like before they start the kids on the hormones. After they've done that, then after they've begun to medically transition, they want to create, this is my opinion, they want to create cyborgs. They're trying to determine if they can't perform gender affirming care, then they can't bring people into the study. So it says the problem was Trump's separate order targeting medical care for transgender youth. I'm assuming this person is trans themselves, but I can't even believe that I have to cover this foolishness. But let Riley finish, and then I'm going to go ahead. We'll recap and I'll give you guys my commentary.
Nike, And Nike has yet to answer to this. They have spent days now avoiding all reporters and journalists asking them if this is true and why they're engaging in this. It'd be a shame if we tagged them in the comments and let them know that we're watching and that we want answers. So if this wasn't enough to put you off from buying Nike ever again, maybe the fact that they're investing money into seeing if you can medically abuse boys enough to make it fair for them to compete against girls is.
All right, you guys. So I went ahead and I played the clip of Riley Gaines really, really quickly. I want to recap this for the folks in the back who are like, this is not what's really happening. Nike is alleging or allegedly trying to find out how much do they need to medically mutilate a young boy's body so that he can no longer have so that he no yeah right so he no longer has a biological advantage over girls in sports. So I don't know if the goal was like, well, we just want to be a little bit more inclusive, so we need to do this. And I'm like, no, that's not inclusion. That's not inclusion. That's not science. That's not progressive. That is child abuse. It is wicked. It is demonic. These evil people are so hell bent on just perverting God's created order and his natural design for creation that they will go out of their way to financially support experiments that will make boys weaker and feminine on purpose just so they can push their twisted agenda of having biological boys compete against biological women. And when I saw this on Twitter, I was like, what in the Frankenstein have we become? How is it that we're going to be able to have a well-adjusted society if these are the things that this is a shoe company? This is not a pharmaceutical company or some biotech mogul trying to figure this out. This is a shoe company. And it makes me ask the question, one, why we need answers. We need to hear from them. But two, what is the thing that's motivating an athletic corporate giant to fund something like this? And so, like I said, Nike obviously, as of now, I don't know, maybe a couple hours ago, they did say something, but they've not responded. They've been ducking and dodging every journalist and every inquiry, like some guilty man at a press conference. But I want to ask why. I think the reason is because they don't want accountability. They want compliance. In my opinion, they want to conduct this experiment under the radar, and then when they believe they've been successfully, when I should say, when they've successfully created these perfect male cyborgs, then they'll go public with it as a rebuttal to no, there's no disadvantage with the girls who have to play against these trans kids. No, they're just the same because see, we've had them on this therapy for so long, and their strength is gone. We've taken every semblance of masculinity away from them, and now they can compete just like the girls can. And I'm like, you know what? Y'all are sick. I think that the culture is going to sit back like blind sheep. I'm thankful that Riley Gaines is involved because she has built a platform bringing attention to this. And I, for one, see, my kids don't really play in sports. And so, even though this doesn't directly affect me, I'm trying to understand why a shoe brand would have such a vested interest in something like this. And one of the reasons why I think it is because demons think that, particularly the ones that support or the ones that are in leadership at Nike, I would say, they think that if they can just plaster little rainbow flags on their social media accounts in June and hand out sponsorships to confuse TikTok influencers, that they can just silence the rest of us with, branding and slogans. And I'm like, no, I think we've had enough of this. And now we're at the point where we're ready to be like, y'all have effectively lost your mind. And one of the main questions I have is, where are the feminists? right? Where are all of the women who claim to be so interested in protecting women? Where are y'all? This is how I know this has nothing to do with protecting women. Because the wicked culture, they want to erase biological distinctions and turn the entire world into a planet full of freaks and weirdos and mentally incapacitated psychopaths and cyborgs. That's what they want. And I promise you, I feel like the more stuff that comes out, I feel like I'm watching an episode of Star Trek or something. This is not normal. None of this is normal. And so for all of the little tree loving, hippie environmentalist types, I'm like, where's y'all's outrage? Where is your outrage of this toxic warfare that's being waged on this vulnerable population of adolescents who are clearly dealing with some sort of mental disorder that is leading them to believe that in this season of their life right now that they're trans? Many of them, honestly, if you guys remember growing up being a teenager or a preteen, like everything is weird. Like your body is doing things and you don't really understand what it's doing. And one day you want to be a cat. The next day you think you can fly. And then the day after that, you're like, you know what? I think I'm gonna be a tomboy, or I'm gonna be into goth, or I want to be a thug. Like you have so many things that are going through because your hormones, trust me, we deal with hormone dysregulation as adolescents, and listen, when you get older it gets worse. We crazy. Premenopausal and perimenopausal women, we ain't got good sense either. So it's almost like they're taking advantage of periods in human development. They're finding the vulnerabilities and deciding that, you know what, we're going to exploit this population, and we're going to exploit them and do all kinds of experiments on them. And we don't really care about the long-term consequences of this. No, we're just doing this right now because if we can figure out a way to make a buck out of it, who cares if their lives are destroyed on the back end? Now, here's the kicker with this. My thing is, if this were a pharmaceutical company running experiments on children in Africa, like the outrage would be deafening. And if this were a story about experimenting on animals, you best to believe Peter would be setting up shop outside of the Nike headquarters right now. But this is different. See, this has the rainbow stamp of approval. So suddenly, we're supposed to just nod our heads and say, this is science. And I'm like, nah, this is not science. The left has zero respect for humanity or science. Because if they respected science, they would recognize the humanity of the Imago Dei and that God established male and female, and that can be proven, and that is rooted in science. Just like they claim to respect humanity, but we've seen this before, right? They had no problem experimenting on black men in the Tuskegee trials, giving black men syphilis on purpose. So now they're coming for your kids. They're coming for your kids. They are going to find some confused, traumatized kid who cannot make rational decisions and convince him that he is a girl, and to truly help him get in touch with his feminine side. They're going to start him on this cocktail of hormone disrupting drugs that intentionally make him weaker so that he doesn't have the biological advantage of a man competing against a woman. I'm like, you know what? Y'all are sick. Now, I thought the argument from the pro-trans community is that trans women, and y'all forgive me, I don't know if the proper term for a man that believes he is a woman is a trans woman or a trans man, but if I mess it up, just know that's what confusion and chaos does. It causes things to be confused. But if the trans woman, I thought the argument was that they're just like real women and they are the same. I'm like, so does this experiment by admission prove that there is a biological difference in strength and muscle mass that gives the trans woman an unfair advantage? I don't know. So Instead of the left just admitting to their lunacy, now they kind of are admitting to it, but in order to make it make more sense in their warped and twisted mind and to make it more fair, they figure, let's just biologically mess with what the Lord has made so that the physical attributes of this person now match the psychological attributes that they believe themselves to possess. Y'all, this is a spiritual war against God's design. It's a war against God's design, God's image in the earth, and his created order. And I am telling you, soon, y'all, we're going to be living on a planet with a bunch of mutants. Mark my words. You think you've seen a science fiction movie? No, real life is going to be way much more interesting. We're going to have an entire segment of the population that wants to live in the sewer, and they're going to believe themselves to be Ninja Turtles. Just watch. I'm going to have to change my name from April Chapman to April O'Neil. And I'm going to start going down to the sewer, reporting on the sewage foolishness if we keep this up. And I know y'all like, she cracking jokes. Well, right now I am kind of cracking a joke, but that's the extent of where this is the implication of us giving in and saying, well, that's just how, the left, they always into something crazy. No, how left does the left need to go before the people of God who are still identifying as left recognize that, yeah, it's time for me to get off the ship. It's time for me to get off the ship. So here's what I'd like to do as we wrap this up. There are some theological implications and the things that the scriptures say. The Bible's not silent on this. In fact, I love one of my favorite Bible verses of old is Romans 1. Romans 1 warns about this. It explicitly says, in Romans 1, I know Romans 1 off the top of my head, but I don't want to misquote it. Claiming to be wise, they've become fools and worshiped and served the creature rather than the creator who is blessed forever. Amen. But before you get to that part, it talks about how they've exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Then it says, claiming to be wise, they become fools, right? So what we are witnessing is what happens when a culture actively suppresses the truth in unrighteousness. You may believe that the Bible is just this collection of nice stories, but when you read through the testimony of scripture, you be like, I think this is where we are right about now. This Romans 1 is proving to be pretty prophetic, and pretty true. Because when you reject the creator and you start to mutilate his creation, this is the result. Really quickly, you guys, let me read to you in Matthew, I want to say it's Matthew 18. Matthew 18, when after it's talking about church discipline, and it talks about, let me see. No, when he's talking about who is the greatest, he says, but whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. Now, in this context, I know some people like to apply this to all people without distinction. I brought it up because there's an application that can be gleaned from this. It really is talking about if you purposely cause those who belong to God to stumble, those who believe in me to sin. But what I'd like to do is the fact that, like how Romans 1 says, those who give approval to those who practice these things are just as bad. I kind of want to draw a parallel that way, because what happens when you're not just causing a child to sin, but you're actively experimenting on them to serve your ideological agenda? Do you think that you're not going to be held accountable for that? because that's not empowering children. That's not looking out for their well being. That's not supporting fairness. That is sacrificing them on the altar of cultural Marxism and radical gender ideology, which all are both anti God, anti Christian worldviews. And so the last thing I'll say, this is a war on women and the weaponization of boys. Because here's the irony of this entire thing. We were told that this was about women's empowerment. At one point, that was the argument. But now, women like Riley Gaines, who's an actual woman, she's being shoved to the sidelines in favor of the ones who just believe themselves to be women. So Nike used to say, if you have a body, you're an athlete. Now they're like, if you mutilate your body, you're a role model. And so I don't care how you try to slice this. You cannot erase God's design with a scalpel, right? A syringe or a sponsorship, Nike. I don't care how much we celebrate Dylan Mulvaney. He is still a man, a girly one and real petite nonetheless, but he's still a man. And you cannot transition your way out of the truth. Okay? Chromosomes don't care about your feelings. God made you exactly the way that you're supposed to be, and you don't have to like it, but the truth does not change, and it's not relative. Real women are tired of being erased by this madness, and if real women don't stand up and speak out and say something, you're going to start feeling the assault way more stronger than it already is. So what can we do? First, we need to speak up. Okay, we can speak up for the unborn. Now we need to speak up. Listen, share this video, tag Nike, tag your mama, tag your daddy. I don't know, tag Riley Gaines. It don't matter. But we need to get more eyes on this foolishness. Keep your eyes out. I'm interested to see if Nike's going to come out and say something about this. However, I also believe speaking up with your wallet. Now, you don't have to do this. I am not trying to be, Jamal Bryant 2.0 and have, whole churches leading boycotts. Okay. Because to me, that's just silly. However, if you feel led to stop giving these wicked corporations your money, just don't buy their products. Like, we ain't got to make a big thing about it. We're just like, oh, we see you. Oh, no, I'm not buying those. Okay. Don't just stop buying the Nikes. Explain and tell your kids why. No, you can't have that shoe. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors why. Make it clear that you don't fund abuse, no matter how good the sneakers look. And then above all else, let's just pray for our children. I do believe that all of the confusion that we're seeing today, you know, they try to say that transgenderism has always been with us, but I think now it is a level of indoctrination and it's social pressure and it's the cool thing to do as to why so many are confused and misled. And then they're being used by adults, who have sinister motives. And so I am just praying that we'll have more voices that will talk about these things and cover these issues, because the people of God, we ain't bending or bowing to this foolishness. However, I can see how families who, particularly if they are becoming influenced by the psychological medical community that will tell you, what, if you don't give into this, you'll end up with a dead child. Would you rather a trans child or a dead child? And I'm like, no, don't, that is, why is that the only options available? Why can't we kind of affirm to the child whose frontal lobe is not still developed who they are and who God made them to be? We don't know why they're displaying this gender confusion, but what we're not about to do is give in to the child and allow them to be transitioned and medically abused, because they're just a little confused right now. No, we don't buy into the lie that child abuse is love and that mutilation is medicine. We're not doing that. So that's all I wanted to say about that topic. I'm interested to hear what you guys think down in the comments below. If you guys have already stopped buying Nike, kudos to you. But if you have thoughts on what you think other Christians should be doing to resist or push back against this gender madness, let's talk about it in the comments below.